and I have been dancing and teaching, performing, and this is where I have this lovely young lady sitting next to me who I'm so proud of, my daughter, who has also imbibed a lot of the skills of the art form from me, and her mom also. I left out her mom is also a very accomplished dancer as well. She's not here, but she's looking after the grand right now. So I'd pass you over to Chandani to introduce
Hello,
her.
I'm Chandani Prasad, and my dad is of Guyanese heritage. My mom is Trinidadian. I was born in Trinidad, but I've grown up pretty much most of my life in the UK. As my dad says, my mom and dad are both classical Indian dancers, and from the age of about 5, I joined in to do Indian classical dancing, and that's us.
Sorry, I was muted there. Thank you so much for both of you. We can move on next to Jana and Amir Ali.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Amir Ali, and we live in the northwest of London in Harrow. I'm Guyanese Indian origin, first generation in England, born in England. My parents are both Guyanese, and I'm a pharmaceutical chemist and lawyer, and I work for a healthcare company.
And I'm Jana Ali. I'm mixed, so I'm half Indo-Caribbean Guyanese and I'm half Egyptian from my mother's side. I'm a creative from London, so I do fashion design. Currently I'm working on a film project, but I also work as a community and resettlement worker.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll move on to Rachel and Dennis Jagrup.
Okay, I'm Dennis Jagrup, and I was not born here. I was born in Guyana, British Guyana it was called at that time, and I came here back in the 60s. But I grew up here most of my life. I'm now called a British citizen. No, seriously. I'm retired. I'm an engineer. I used to work on London Underground, if you all know it, and I am now fully retired. So I'm just taking it easy with my daughter and her son. So I'm a granddad.
Hi, I'm Rachel Jagrup. I'm his daughter, and so I'm half Guyanese, half Sri Lankan. I've lived in London, well, West London, all my life, and I'm currently studying. I also work in further education, and I run my own natural skincare business as well.
Well done.
I have to say, Rachel, I've ordered her masks when I was in London. They did wonders for my skin, so amazing skincare.
Thank you, Narosha.
We love
look what
it.
it's done to mine.
Hold on, we have some, I'm just adding in some participants into the room. I'm asking if any participants that are not panelists, if you can please keep your cameras off, and we're gonna focus on just having that conversation and dialogue with our panelists. Okay, we're just waiting for everything to connect. Perfect. So yes, please respect and keep the microphones and the cameras off, and we will continue to have this conversation with our amazing panelists. So the first question for our fathers, and we can go in reverse cycle this time, but it's tell us a little bit about your migration story and how you came to be in the UK. What was that experience like? Why did you decide to move? What did you leave behind? What were you hoping to find? Anything that has to do with that actual journey of migration for you. So Dennis, if you would like to speak on that first.
Wait, go on.
Well, I didn't ask to come to this country. I was forced to come to this country with my parents because I was enjoying my life in Guyana. You know, I was a young boy, but my parents decided to come here because of the problem that was happening in Guyana at the time, you know, back in the 50s and 60s. But
explain what the problems were though.
Well, the problem was between the Black people and the Asian people. Yeah, I don't know if you all know it, but we had, when the British left Guyana, there was conflict, you know, who wants to be in power, you know, between the Black and the Asian. So that's what happened, and it was getting bad. So that's why I think Mum and Dad decided to come to the UK, you know. But I love Guyana. It was where I was born, you know, and I even look at it at videos now and see what it's like, and I still want to go back home, and that's how I feel right now. I want to go back home.
Thank you for sharing.
That's okay.
And have you gone back since you came to the UK?
I went back with my parents when they was alive. I went back in 1975.
Okay.
And I was young then and naive, but I enjoyed it. And I've not been back since.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's really important to note that a lot of times migration is not by choice, but it's because of a lot of the conflicts and issues that have pushed us out of our own homes. And I mean, when we even think and we dig a little deeper, that motherland and homeland of India, how a lot of people were pushed out of that land into the Caribbean. So just thinking about the displacement that has happened in our history and in our families, and like, where is our home and where is our land and how do we root ourselves? So it's definitely interesting to talk about these different experiences. I'd like to go on to Amir after, if he would like to share his experience.
Yeah, sure. Obviously, I have a different perspective because I'm a first generation Guyanese person in Britain. My parents came, my father came, well, they were both Windrush people. So my father came in 1952 to England, and my mother came 1 year after in 53. And he came to educate, you know, because Guyana, obviously, you can only go to matriculation, and then you can't go much further than that. So he came to go to university. You know, he's told us about how he came on the boat. It was about 2 to 3 weeks, and it went all over the place before he got to Britain. And when he landed, he had actually left his money behind, and he didn't have any money. And he was really lucky that he had made friends with a person who was coming over with him, and he lent him some money to get started. And then, you know, he came to study, as I said, study medicine. But he was lonely, so he called my mum over. And at the time, when they left Guyana, they had already had 2 children. So they left the children with the grandparents. And my mother came in 53. And her first experience when she got off the boat at Southampton was that she cried. And she cried all the way coming to London on the train, because it wasn't what she thought it was. You know, this idea, this cliche idea of the streets paved with gold. It was dark, it was foggy, it was very unpleasant, raining. Yeah, and when she came, my father was living in a 1-room, you know, bed sit, and she really said to me, she said, I really didn't know what I was coming to. Do you know what I mean? So they came for education reasons, but as Dennis said, the idea was to go back to Guyana, but then the riots occurred in Guyana. And, you know, my grandparents told them they should stay. And subsequently, they stayed and had quite a horrible time because there was a lot of racism in England at the time. It was after the war, and the only people that were here in London or in Britain were people who were left over from the war, who were soldiers. So they didn't have much community to go around. So we kept within the family because they were the first lot to come from Guyana, even from the families. So we sort of were very much amongst English people rather than our own.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And for those that may not be familiar with UK history, would you be able to just quickly explain what Windrush means, or Windrush generation, like who and what that consisted of?
Yeah, the Windrush generation was a time just after the war when Britain had a need for labor, basically. The population was pretty devastated by deaths from the war. And also on the other side of it, the English people didn't want to do a lot of the jobs that people from the West Indies came up. Nurses came, laborers came, people came to work on the underground, the railway, and so on. So there was a definite call from Britain to bring people over to Britain. But, bringing people over was one thing, but what they faced was another. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Fidel, if you'd like to share your experience next with migration as
Sure.
well.
Thank you very much. My story is a bit different. Like I said earlier, I was born in the UK to Guyanese parents, mom and dad. My father studied civil engineering in the UK, and that's how myself, my younger brother, was born here. And when I was roughly about the age of 6, my dad decided, I'm missing my mom, I want to go back. So we all packed and went back to Guyana, which, as you quite rightly said, was British Guyana then. And so I did all my schooling in Guyana. At the age of about 14, actually from much younger than that, I did like Bollywood dancing and Bollywood movies and the songs. And so in my mind, I wanted to be a Bollywood star, to be honest with you. So that was my focus, being a Bollywood star and a dancer and everything. So when I was about 14 years of age, my mom decided to get me into classical dance. And so I started on my journey as an Indian classical dancer from the age of 14 in Guyana. Uh, After that, I came back to the UK as a young teenager when I was about 16 or 17 to see what's life like in the UK. You know, you're growing up in Guyana, you think that life in England is the best thing since sliced bread. So I decided to come on my own when I was 16, 17 and see what's it like. But mind you, after about 2 years, I felt homesick. I was missing my family, missing my brothers, my sisters, and I just went back. Apparently, my dad, as a civil engineer, he got a job in Trinidad. So what we did, we all migrated to Trinidad, and I lived there for over 10 years. And that's where I met my lovely wife, Aisha, who also was a dancer in our dancing group. And we both won scholarships to go to India. We entered a competition in Trinidad. I don't know if you heard of a competition called Mastana Bahar, which is very popular in Trinidad and Tobago. And we won the second prize, which was quite an enormous prize. So we were actually on our way to India to further our dance careers. And we came here with this young little lady here. She was just about 2.5. So we came to England and we said, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to set up home here for a little while and then go to India. But it never happened. So we're still living here after 30 odd years because one had to get a job, one had to get a place to live, you had to look after a child. So we actually quashed our dreams of continue our dance in India. And in the UK here, what we've done, we established ourselves here and we joined a very popular dance company here in the UK. And we've done a lot of programs. One of our highlights is performing for the Queen at the opening of one of the V&A Museum, the Sir Houghton Gallery. Yeah. And so my migration to the UK was a bit different, but I do remember the days of the riots in Guyana, and they were horrible days. They were horrible days. Yes, we speak about racism here in the UK. We got racism all over, but in Guyana, it's funny. It's among the Indians and the blacks. But when we come to a place like the UK, we all live together and happily here the same way. So so that's my story in a nutshell there.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I think it's really interesting that you moved around from coming to the UK, then choosing to go back, then choosing to come back, and just how the UK has constantly been a little bit of a factor in your life at the different age ranges. So that is incredibly interesting for all of us to hear. I think another question, again, for the fathers in relation to this would be, what were the challenges that you faced when you came to the UK? What was one of the biggest challenges that you maybe had? What did you miss the most about home when I know you said your family, but how did you overcome some of these challenges when you first came to the UK? So I'm gonna go back to Dennis to think about some of those challenges.
Well, I was a little boy when I came here, and I remember coming from a beautiful hot country and landing here in October, freezing cold. So that was one challenge I had to face. You know, I landed at the airport in October, I think it was, and I walked out the plane and it was freezing. And I said to my brothers, why are we, it's freezing here. What am I doing here? I'm from a hot country. Anyway, I had to accept it. I had to accept that I've landed in a different part of the world. It was strange. It's like you're an alien. You've come from another part of the world, but never seen it before. And when I saw my mum at the airport wearing a black coat, I've never seen her like that.
You mean it's like a fur coat? Like
A fur coat. I ran back. I said, that's not my mum, But no, the real challenge here was trying to speak English, the way the English speak it, proper English. Because when I went to school, I had to speak in my own language, but gradually I had to learn proper English, and that was hard. But I've picked it up over the years. And the other, I think as I've grown up, the challenges here is obviously in school, at work, is to adapt to your new life. You have to adapt to it. And if you don't adapt to it, it's very hard. I've had abuse at school, abuse at work, so it was difficult. It was difficult, But saying all that, I've been here 60 odd years, so I've coped with it. I've had to cope with it,
Was there were there spaces in which you were able to find that community, even though you had left behind so much of that? Were you able to still, or was it mostly like family members that had come with you that helped you keep that community?
I think Rani was the only person that really held that together.
Yeah, my mum had lots of friends, lots of Guyanese friends. And, when we first came here, like, who was saying they lived in one room? We lived in one room in Hammersmith, and, but it, we had to cope with it. It was strange, but my mum and dad kept us together. I can say 100%. If it wasn't for my mum and dad, I don't think I'd be here today. But obviously, because they had lots of friends and support, we were able to stay together.
Thank you so much for sharing that. That familial support is so important. Amir, you can either talk about challenges that maybe your parents faced when they first came here, or even challenges you faced growing up, as first generation as well.
No, I mean, I think I mentioned before quite a lot, but when my parents came 52, 53, like I said, there weren't even many people around that they knew. And I have to say that even though we talk about racism in Britain, and, I think you're absolutely right that there is racism everywhere in Guyana. I think, my view on things is I think our own race, Indian race, is probably the most racist of all races, to be honest. But that's another issue. But having said that, I think from what my parents said, that when they came, even though they came to nobody that they knew, the English people, they did make good English friends, who welcomed them, and they managed to build a good rapport with. It was exactly as Dennis said. It was very, very hard for them. They You know, my dad used to work almost 2 jobs they didn't even know that they could get benefits as Commonwealth citizens to pay for their education or any other benefit. They never knew. So they worked for everything that they had to do. And my father worked in Lions tea shops, washing the windows. At night, he worked in a lodge for old people, an old people's home. So they did a lot of menial jobs to keep themselves going, as Dennis said, and they survived and they built themselves. You know, they were very hardworking. My mother, she worked in advanced laundry. She worked sewing. You know, they did anything they could do to just build themselves up. And as Dennis quite rightly said, you know, they were the safe haven for us when we were growing up. It was always nice to come home, and it always felt extremely safe to come home. But having said that, I don't think that, I faced racism when I was growing up, and not until it got later. And that was in the late 60s when you started to get, you know, the National Front and other groups, you know, and so on. But before that, it wasn't too bad. You know, I was sort of the only colored boy in the class. And so everybody sort of, you know, felt, oh, this is something new. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, it was very family. And then as the family started to come over, then as Dennis said as well, you know, the family became your sort of cultural haven. And, you know, you would go for weddings, for religious celebrations, and so on. Any opportunity there was to have a celebration, the Guyanese used to get together, and the Trinidadians as well, because a lot of people were mixed marriages, Trinidadian and Guyanese as well. So, you know, it was a very nice time in a way. It was a horrible time because of the environment, but it was a nice time because the community got together to support each other.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's great to see challenges that you may have faced as well as your parents and how that has shaped over time. Fidel, if you'd like to share your own challenges that you may have faced when you came here.
Okay, I have to say I have really faced much challenges, so to speak. Uh, like I said, when I came back to the UK for the second time with my family, to me it was really trying to get a livelihood, and so looking for jobs, looking for place to live, and that's what I found that quite challenging at that time in my life. But I was quite lucky in terms of landing a job, which I'm still doing on to today after 33 years. So I got a job with the government in the UK. So I've been exposed to a lot of people of all ethnicities, colors, and everything, because it's civil service in the UK. It's a mix of everyone and everything. So I really did not really face, be honest, I have not faced, like my brothers there, so any adversities from people. Um, so my challenges were more like more domestic than out there. But having said that, I know there is racism in this country, and I do see it. I do see it within my own organization, but it's sort of really on. It's really kept on the cover, and it's when you listen to what people say, how people act, their attitudes and stuff. That's where you see it. What I find quite challenging is when I have to keep explaining to people who I am, and that's where I find challenge, because they look at me, they see I'm Indian in outlook, but sometimes when I get together with my own people, my Guyanese people, Trinidad people, I will go very colloquial. I will really go colloquial, and they will be looking at me and say, but why are you talking black? Why are you pretending to be a black person? Why are you speaking like that for? And so I have to explain the diaspora, the whole story. And I'm still doing that today after 30 odd years. Because when people meet me, they always want to know, but you Indian, you got straight hair, you Indian. What are you? What are you really? And that is, to me, that's a challenge every time that I'm deciding I probably would have to start walking with a placard in front of me and then I explain myself. But Yeah, so that really is one of the biggest challenges, as my daughter probably will tell you a bit more of their own experiences here in the UK in 2021, what they experienced. But this is something that goes on and on and on. But that's where I like to finish there and say that that's what my challenges were in this UK.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think all of us, even generations after, can still relate to not knowing how to tell people that we are Indian and Caribbean at the same time, and how I feel like it blows people's mind to be like, you have brown skin, but you're from the Caribbean. Like, how is that possible? And there's such little history about our ancestry that is out there, and we have to constantly educate people. I know I'm that person that will wear anything that has a Trinidad flag on it, just so people don't ask me questions, and you can just tell off of the flag I'm Caribbean. So I'd love to transition that into talking to some of our daughters here. So Chandani, if you could maybe start to build up. I know the word Indo-Caribbean too means a lot to you, and what that experience was navigating that in the UK growing up. How did you navigate your identity?
Oh, I love being Indo-Caribbean. So since coming to the UK, I think potentially my dad had a very different experience to the uncles on the panel, just because he came at a different time. So we came up like in the 1990s, 89, 90. So by that point, there was already quite an established Indo-Caribbean community in the UK. So when we came, we being dancers as well, we kind of slot straight into that community. So like my dad said, his brothers and sisters and stuff were already here. So I had cousins, I had my parents had loads of Guyanese and Trinidadian friends. We used to go to all the dances. So in our personal life, we were very West Indian. At weekends, we would pretty much only mix of West Indian people if we weren't dancing. So I've always known the term Indo-Caribbean. And so I've always been able to identify as an Indo-Caribbean in my personal life and when I'm around Indo-Caribbean people. But the challenge was when I was at school or in work or college, university, when nobody understands. And I'm so proud of this heritage, but it's like you can't even just revel in your heritage without having to constantly explain first. And by the time you get to the punchline, people are just not interested anyway. So yeah, I think for me, I grew up so much in the culture that being Indo-Caribbean was just who I am. And yes, it's being so involved in the community has just made me so passionate and in love with my culture, the food, everything. So it's been quite easy for me to identify personally, but outside it's just, and I think the more you identify, it annoys you even more when people don't understand, because you have a very good understanding of yourself. It's not like you're trying to search for who you are. When you grow up so strong in the community, you very well know who you are. So other people constantly be, no, but you're black, no, but you're Indian. It's like, no, I'm not. I know what I am and I'm trying to tell you, but you're not listening. So for me, it's just really frustrating.
Can I add a little bit there? I mean, the good thing about us that we can enjoy being Indian, but we can also enjoy being Caribbean as well, because we've got that rich Caribbean flavors, our foods, our music, and all of that. Besides, so we're quite lucky that we can get them together, we can marry them together, and we've got our own thing. So yeah, so really proud being in the Caribbean, I must say.
It is very true. Yeah.
I have to say, my mom's in the background here, and she just said we got our own kalalu. So yeah, she's in the background making us but thank you so much for sharing that. We have the beauty of both cultures, and we get to own and be in both those spaces. Jana, do you maybe want to talk about navigating that Indo-Caribbean identity?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like for me and Chandni, it's like polar opposites, because Chandni, you grew up like so prominent in the community and like you were there and your identity was already laid out for you, you know? But for me, it took quite a while to like really get to terms with like what it meant to be Indo-Caribbean, and also accepting that my experiences within that are valid. Obviously, I grew up in Wembley, where it's quite an Asian prominent area, so a lot of people look like me, but not a lot of people could understand my experience, especially being mixed as well. So for me, Indo-Caribbean has like layers to it. Like, first of all, it's a word that I can present to people and get less questions back, which always helps, because we know how many questions we get when we say that we're Indo-Caribbean. the word itself, Indo-Caribbean, and that hyphen in between, we're neither the Indo or the Caribbean, we're that bridge, we're that thing that fuses the two together, which is such a beautiful thing because we've created this new culture in itself, which is so unique and special. And then even deeper to that, to me, Indo-Caribbean means resilience, and the fact that our ancestors have, and we still continue to survive and make sure that our next generation has the best future possible. So when you look back in history from when they came from India to the West Indies, or whether they came from the West Indies and the Windrush here, we've always been a set of people who are determined to better our lives and better our lineage. So that's what it means to me.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Rachel, would you like to speak a little bit about your own experience navigating your cultural identity in the UK growing up?
So mine was a bit like Janet's because I'm mixed. So, but for me, I was raised more with my dad's side. So I was pretty much Indo-Caribbean growing up more than I was like Sri Lankan. But saying that, Indo-Caribbean is only a term I've really understood in my 20s. If I was younger and I actually had that, identity to really kind of put out there to people, again, I think I would have got less questions. But growing up in the area I was brought up in was a struggle because, again, everyone looks Asian, everyone looks Indian. I get spoken to in Punjabi by the aunties and everything. But then when I say I don't speak this language or whatever, they look so offended. They look so upset. And a part of me wished I was, in a sense, more Indian, but then at the same time, I just kind of like thought to myself, no, like I'm proud of where I'm from anyway. And my dad's never made it a thing to be ashamed of where we're from. One thing that I will say is that people had this assumption of saying, "God, Guyanese women are like this, Guyanese women are like that." There's those kind of stereotypes that we may get sometimes. They may be greedy or they like, etc. All these type of things. So growing up, I didn't want to have that attached to me. So I was kind of struggling as a Guyanese woman. How do I portray myself? What do I need to be like? And then embracing our culture was something we were quite blessed about, because my gran, she really held that down for us. The food, the music. I'd walk in on a Saturday, she's watching a Bollywood, and my dad's not so much into them. He's not so much into them, but for myself, I'm kind of grateful that she still held on to what we had, because then it's passed on to me. Because now when he comes over to mine, I'm watching the Bollywood, I'm making the roti, I'm making the curry, and he
makes good curry.
So in a way, he didn't realize obviously what he was doing. Taking me over to my grand's every Saturday, walking up to Wembley High Street with her, getting the meat, getting all these things with her. But it stayed in me, and I think for now, my son, that's important. He sees me, making the roti, asking me, "Mummy, can I help you make this?" And that is so important, because when we're young, we really don't appreciate it until, we're older. But now my identity, as Fidel, said, you have to explain yourself regardless. I don't think England is still ready yet to say, oh yeah, they're Indo-Caribbean. They still have no clue.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. That kind of goes right into the next question, which was about like cultural traditions. So, what do you remember learning about at home? Was there a specific activity, tradition, or event that really stands out in your memory about your home life and that cultural identity? I know you just talked about the cooking aspect. Jana, is there anything specific to you that was traditional or something that you always associated with the culture growing up?
Yeah, I think just like Rachel, it was my grandmother who really kind of passed on the traditions to me. It was a lot of like making bake whenever we went over to her, and even like sewing, which at such a young age I didn't realize was something that I thought it was just like, oh, she sewed, so she's teaching me to sew. And it's only like now in my older years I'm realizing that this is very culturally bound. Like this is a skill that she used to survive, and she passed it down to me, and in some weird way I'm using it to survive as well. And I've kind of like purposefully chosen to use it as a way to carry on their legacy and to tell their stories. But it's only randomly come full circle, as if it's like some sort of like spiritual like happening, which I find really interesting. I mean, my siblings as well, like my sisters, they would also learn how to make bake and sew and stuff like that. We would also watch Bollywood movies as well. But for us, it was a part of our culture, but it was more so like, this is where like our ancestors come from, like, and it was like this romanticized kind of like vision of like what our ancestors were in. And like, obviously now looking at the history, it's not, but I mean, but then it's some connection to our Indian heritage, and we get to then rewatch those movies with that image in our head of like, of this romanticized Indian vision, which is such a nice kind of experience that she kind of gave to us. So yeah.
Thank you. I also know that, I know we've had conversations about this before, we featured your work, that you also grew up in the mosque as a Muslim Indo-Caribbean as well. Do you want to maybe speak a little bit about the aspect of religion being prominent in your identity and growing up?
Yeah, so like, as I think I've spoken about this with you, is that I've always felt my most Indo-Caribbean self when I was in that mosque. Before then, I kind of really didn't understand what this idea of Indo-Caribbean was. I kind of realized that there was Indian like aspects to our culture, but I was really finding it hard to figure out what that Caribbean side was. Like, I knew I was from the Caribbean, but I didn't understand what that meant. And I think we're saying it was 2004, we decided to go to the Saturday schools at my aunt's mosque, well, my uncle's mosque, and then it was then when I started to really understand what this whole Indo-Caribbean culture was really about, from the sweet accents and the food, even the dialogue, the way that people spoke to each other. And so when I was there, even though I was mixed and perhaps there were more just Caribbean people there, my culture never felt compromised. I never felt questioned. I just felt like I belonged. And maybe that was because I was also a part of the family, and so I was embraced in that way. But it's funny because when I was there, I never understood that there was more than one type of Indo-Caribbean. I thought, oh yeah, Muslim Indo-Caribbean, that's it. And then I realized that we're actually the minority. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't even think like, oh, of course you have Hindu Indo-Caribbeans, Christian, atheists, like, of course there's gonna be a plethora of different people. And then it was only, I think, recently after the whole university experience, I started opening up to the rest of the community. I realized there's so much nuance there. There's so much different experience. And that makes my experience even more special to me, because I've experienced what it's like to be the minority within the minority and really be at the center of that and feel like you belong in that. So, yeah.
I think, you know, we made a conscious effort, my wife and I, because my wife is Egyptian. So obviously the kids, I have a son and 3 daughters, and Jana's one of them. But, you know, there was also the Egyptian culture, which is quite strong, you know. So, you know, they grew up a little bit at the beginning with a lot of Egyptian culture, as well as obviously English culture. And then I felt a little bit conscious about that. And I decided I better take them somewhere where they can at least see with yeah, I did that on purpose. and that's why I took them to the mosque that my uncle had set up amongst the Guyanese Trinidadian Muslims. And of course, as you know, Dennis will tell you, and so on, that you know, the Guyanese and Trinidadians are almost, they don't think about religion because they have Muslim friends, Hindu friends, you know, all of the different, because they all join together. They don't really make a difference between, you know, Indo-Caribbean from a religious perspective. They get on very well together. So, you know, my family has many Hindu, Guyanese and Trinidadian friends, and even family, because, you know, some family is married, you know, between the two.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's really important to know that culture comes through everything, whether it's food, music, religion, that culture is infused into all of these different spaces. Chandni, I would love to hear from you and what, you know.
So clearly,
as well.
Yeah, my dad is Mr. Bollywood, as you can see. So for me, obviously, you know, I've had a very kind of reverse upbringing to you guys, where I was submerged in it from baby. Will be here even now on a weekend. My child's 1 year old and my dad's got Be For You on. So even her at 1 year old, when we go to a family friend's house, they've got her playing the harmonium, just like banging on the harmonium. Like, this is just how we pass on the traditions. This is how I learned them, from the dancing to the food, always around Guyanese people, always around Trinis. And I think, I know that you guys became into Indo-Caribbean a little bit later on, but for me, it was such a strong community growing up that now that we've got less stuff to go to and the community is kind of dispersing even further, I'm actually finding the opposite, where because we don't have these things anymore, I'm feeling a little bit out of sorts because I don't fit in anywhere at work now that I'm working. So I used to depend on these weekend things to feel nice around my people, around my culture, my food, everything. It is very strong within my household, but it was nice to experience it as a big community. And now it's not, it's barely there anymore. So I'm finding that I'm a little bit out of sorts, and that makes me worry for my child, that she won't have the upbringing into the Indo-Caribbean community that I had. So we are gonna, obviously she's gonna be Little Miss Bollywood, just being part of my family. But again, you know, there's a conversation about, is our community, is our culture just Bollywood? Because there's loads of Indo-Caribbean people who don't even like Bollywood and will argue that that's not even our culture. You know, the Indian dance that we do, people would say that that's not even Indo-Caribbean, but to us it's a part of our culture, it's a part of who we are. So for me, yeah, everything, it wasn't just in the house for me that was Indo-Caribbean, it was just everything around me was Indo-Caribbean.
But just to add in a bit more there, because we're also very we take part in the Mandir as well, because we now, because of the Corona, everything is done by Zoom, as we're doing this particular meeting today. So every weekend I log in and, you know, I sing my bhajans and listening to the stories that are, you know, of you know, our religious mythology, which I really do love listening to. So that is also part of what we're made up of. So it's, as you rightly said, it's not only the food, the drinks or whatever we do, but religion as well. So that really keeps us binded, and that's make, you know, I'm so glad that I can log in every weekend and listen to the religion, to religious things. So yeah, so that's all part.
And
That's
it's
all part of
important
it.
to have that space for Indo-Caribbean people, like the mosque was set up, like the mandirs was set up for Guyanese and Trinidadians,
Yeah.
because when that generation came here, they didn't automatically fit into the existing mandirs and mosques, so they created their own environment.
Yes, yes,
And
correct.
that has made like my generation so grateful. Like we might probably take it for granted that we just grew up in it, but I understand that the struggle must have been there, which is what caused these people to set these things up.
Yeah, yeah.
I definitely understand that, because I think even being like mixed on both sides for me, that, you know, here we have like temples that are like Hindu temples, but they're Tamil oriented, so everything's in Tamil. And I don't speak Tamil, even though I'm half, because it is like hard to learn the language. But for like, when I know my sister goes to like the West Indian mandir here, and that has become a space where she's been able to find a lot more comfort, because she actually understands the language that people are speaking. She feels like she identifies a lot more than in the Tamil temples. So I think it's interesting to say that, you know, the religions in itself can have different spaces for the cultures. And
Yeah.
that's really, you know, so important to have. And Fidel, just building on that, I'd love to know, I know you talked about ways in which you've passed that down, but why was it so important to you to pass down culture to your children, even though they're growing up in the UK, growing up British? Why was it important to you to continue to pass down the traditions and culture?
Was that to me?
Yeah.
Was that to me? Okay. Well, do you know what?
We don't know any other way.
Your culture, I mean, your identity and your culture is who you are. I mean, it's who you are, and that makes you a stronger person of having that culture and identity. So I, from beginning, from a little kid, as she said, I made sure, and I've only got one daughter. I've got only one child, one daughter. So it was important that we, you know, we teach her and to make her the best human being possible as we can, as well getting her into good education as well, good school, good university as well. So all that was quite important, and I would like to carry that on with my granddaughter now and others that come. But I also have a dance school, and I teach children as well. So it's important. It's really important to we know our culture, and I will always, until I die, I'm going to continue teaching it.
Amazing. That's absolutely amazing. I wish when I came to the UK, it was not COVID, I would have come take a dance class.
Oh, that would have been great.
Yeah, but next time
Next
for sure.
time.
Yes. Dennis, how about you? What are some things that you passed down to Rachel, and why was it important for you to pass down those pieces of your culture?
I haven't passed anything.
I can say the one thing that he has passed down to me is the language.
Oh no.
If there's anything I learned from a young age, and my son has learned from a young age.
Like Fidel, I love speaking the Guyanese language when I'm with Guyanese people.
Yeah.
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 We all get together, and I can just let go, just be myself.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing I've passed down to my children.
Good.
And they love it. They love it. It's a good laugh. We have a good laugh. And
Go on, tell us something you learned. Tell us something he taught you.
Me? No.
Yeah, go on.
I should have my son here, because he'll literally go off. He'll start saying, dal rice and chicken curry and everything. Like, he was like 3 years old when he learned literally how to say that. I think that's the first meal he actually spoke like fluently. But no, it's one thing. Because my dad had 6 brothers, and so I was quite lucky to be raised around very strong men, and they did not lose. My dad is the only one that probably sounds the most English, to be honest. The rest of them have a really, really strong accents, and when they would all get together, I felt a sense of like a part of my identity. So when my mum has a Sri Lankan accent, so she's like herself, but my dad, he code switches, as you can see, like he sounds very English, but then off camera he'll say something, and it will sound a lot different. But I feel like our language is something that, or just the way we speak, it's very powerful, and people don't realize how powerful it is, because it is a part of your identity. It's, as much as we do discuss the music and the food, and that is amazing, being able to just speak how you want to speak is also quite an empowering thing too. And at work, I have to code switch. We all have done it. We all have to do it. We all have to code switch at, in certain environments, or in school. Most of my friends are West Indian, or they, from a different ethnicity, where I can just talk how I want to talk. I don't need to play it down or sugarcoat it or anything like that. So for me, I'm quite lucky where they embrace it. And when they hear my dad speak, they love it. They want to hear him speak. They're like, come on, go and say something. It's quite funny. And again, I've been accepted for it. And so is my family. We've never actually had any of my friends come over and go, why is your dad speaking like that? He looks Indian, and he's, I've never actually had that. My friends get it, and I'm quite lucky to have that. Where I don't have to explain it to them. Yes, I explain it to other people, but I don't have to explain it to them. And another thing that I think he's kind of underplaying is the hard working ethic, that is in our culture too, that has been stemmed from our ancestors. I think I've seen it from him, I've seen it from my gran, I've seen it from my granddad. It's not always about the shiny things that you achieve in life. It's also about what you have built in your life, and how you've done that around other people. The man he is now, to my son, I'm so lucky to have him as a granddad, because his dad used to scare the life out of me. Like, I was petrified of my granddad. So to see him,
Licks.
he's got the scars to prove it. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
So for me, having him, and all my cousins will even say it, I got lucky. Me and my sister, we got lucky with him as our dad, because our culture is our culture. I don't need to go into that, but at the same time, he's always just shown us love. He's shown us like the hardworking side of things, and he's been very open, I think, as a man. And I think in the Guyanese community, an open man is not accepted, because they really have to hide masculinity. Well, not hide, sorry, but like, if they're feeling vulnerable, they can't show it. So I've been able to build quite a strong relationship with my dad. When I was 19 and I found out I was pregnant, I was petrified of telling him. Like, you didn't do that.
I would have done.
But you still didn't do that. No, sorry, I was 18 actually. Yeah, I was 19 when I had my son. I was 18 when I come and told him. So I was scared to tell him. 100%. I was more scared to tell him than my mum. My mum's obviously more nurturing. He was a bit, But saying that, he's he didn't kick me out. He didn't go all crazy. He didn't do the drama thing. He was just like, all right, what are you going to do about it now? What are you going to do? You know, how are you going to, you know, provide for your child and etc. and all. And he just gave me a real life lesson. And I'm quite grateful for that, because I know there are people in our community, if they were to come home and say that, it'd be a different story. But also another thing about our culture is that my dad converted from Hinduism to Christianity when he was young. So I know that that was a struggle for his family, because my grand, she was a, you know, kind of devout Hindu and everything. So we were raised, again, like I've been around the you know, certain occasions, especially funerals. Unfortunately, I wish there were weddings, but mainly funerals within the Hindu tradition, which really kind of opened my eyes to like where I come from. And then going into the Christian side of things, I was like, these are so contrasting. You know, it was so contrasting. Like being raised in a Pentecostal church and then going to my grandson, you know, hearing like a puja going on or something. It was just so different. She had like a prayer room. She never let me go in it. I was like, why can't I go in it? Because all, you know, I didn't know you have to like wash your hands and all these other things. You got to be really, really clean. I had no idea. But then saying that again, it's nice to be able to look back and know where I come from, and then also now. I play an active role in my church. You know, I don't let my culture and that kind of get in the way of anything. I'm quite lucky in the church I am in, because everyone just accepts each other.
Anything else you'd like to add to that, Dennis, about passing down? And she covered it.
He doesn't realize like how much he has passed out.
I've seen her grown up from a child, and I've tried my best to bring her up the way, you know, we as in our culture, and also being able to adapt to this world, you know, in this life that we're living here, try to adapt and progress in life, you know. I mean, it hasn't been easy, you know, as you know, with children, it's not easy. And I'm sure your mum has found that out as well. But she's a great girl. She's achieved a lot. She's achieved a lot. I'm not, you know, in life, she's done great. And I've tried to be the best as a father, a Guyanese father, an English father, whatever you want to call it. But I've done my best to bring her up, and my other daughter. So, and you know, it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing, you know. And I still have that Guyanese culture. If she makes me angry, I will put on my Guyanese accent. Believe me.
He just starts cussing, and he cusses for days.
And if there's a bottle of rum on the table, you can be sure I'll be having that.
I was just going to touch on to that. I think one thing that I'm quite lucky about is that I know a lot of young people in our community, they grow up with parents that might, you know, be alcoholics, and alcoholism in our community is bad. You know, we've had family members that have been affected by it, and I've seen it. And again, I was quite lucky with my dad, because he'd have a drink, and you know, he can't handle the rum. I can probably handle more than him, but again, I don't ever see him going to the extreme of it. And my mum as well, she's also been like very blessed to have the husband she has. You know, she hasn't had to see, because again, domestic violence as well in our community is a different, again, it's a big subject, you know, people want to shy away from, talk about, and it's in a very subtle way. It can be in subtle ways, but people actually don't realize it's going on. So again, seeing my dad, he set an example of, for me, what to expect from a man, and especially in Indo-Caribbean men, it's not an excuse. You can't say I'm Guyanese, this is what I do, or I'm Trini, no, it's not an excuse. You choose which way, you know, how you want to be.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I think it's so important, because there are a lot of stigmas, and there's a lot of issues in our community that we don't talk about. I always tend to call it a hush-hush culture. That's what we live in. It's a, you know, what will people think? What will people say? Neighbors know our business. It's a very hush-hush culture, and we don't like to talk about the issues that exist in our communities, in our households. So I appreciate the vulnerability in these conversations and being able to talk about that. Amira, if you'd like to talk a little bit about what you've been able to pass down to Jana, and why you've passed there, why it's important to you to pass it.
I think You know, I've tried to, you know, my parents, because of, you know, the time that we grew up, because there weren't that many people from the West Indies over here, they taught us that education is the way out of all of this. Do you know what I mean? Education is the thing that makes people colorblind, you know? And all of my brothers and sisters, you know, took to that. We were pushed, there's no doubt, because West Indian parents are very strong when they say things. So we did all go take education. We all did very well. So I think that I passed that down to my children, but I didn't do it in the same way. I think you'll see that Jana's a fashion designer. You know, I have a son who's in visual media, a daughter who's a health economist like myself, and another one who's just finishing university in psychology. So, you know, I made the difference in the fact that I didn't care what they did, as long as they did what they enjoyed, you know, because I've always enjoyed my career. I've always done what I wanted to do. And just like Dennis, I'm coming up to retirement as well. And I look back on my 40 years of working and I think to myself, I'm quite happy with what I did. Do you know what I mean? I did what I wanted to. And I passed that down to my children in trying to support them to be what they want to be. And, you know, as Fidel had said, you know, we can't discount that religion is important, you know, because religion is twinned a lot with culture as well. And again, you know, my philosophy on life is that I can only take my children to a certain time. After that, they have to choose themselves. And even though, you know, Muslims are very well known for forcing their families to be Muslims, and a lot of those stigmas that Rachel talked about come into a lot of Muslim families, you know. But I obviously want my children to be Muslim, but I've allowed them the freedoms to express themselves and be who they are. I don't tell them to go and pray, don't tell them to go and fast. I teach them it, and then it's completely up to them, because I'm a big believer that the only way to bring children up is to let them, you know, discipline them, but let them have their way and let them do what they want to do, because it's their lives. And I think, you know, Fidel and Dennis, I'm sure we all share the same thing. The difference between us maybe and our compatriots in Guyana is that we've learned that from the British, I think, is that, you know, we cannot force our children down to doing what we want them to do, you know?
Yeah, I think also because like Rachel said, there's always like things that you won't notice that you pass down to us, but even in terms of like family dynamics, like obviously like with West Indian families, they're so big. And I think like we were talking about this once with like when we had the women's chat, of the amount of like falling outs and arguments and how we like to hold on to things and swell up, and, you know, but my dad's always been like, you know, this is family, family's family, and don't let things like that get in the way, you know, make sure you maintain your family unit. And it's things like that which you don't realize, I never even realized was a part of the culture in some aspects and has been passed down, and it's quite common. And that my dad's shown me a different way, and also a little bit of the language as well, because I think the first like things I've like heard of the language and like the different kind of jargon used in it, and the like forms of patwa, I think you kind of maybe jokingly or seriously said to us, and that was my first experience with the language. So things like that as well.
Definitely. I think language is such an important thing that we don't even talk about, because I think people say it's English or like that. It's not like a language in terms of like there's a different way to write, there's a different way for spelling necessarily. It still has its richness in it, however it is. And I know for me growing up, when that's what you grow up with, you don't realize that like everything else is like wrong. Like, you know, I remember going to school and I would say things like, oh, let's on the light, off the light. And my teacher's like, what? She's like, what do you mean on the light? On is not a verb. And I was like, well, that's what we say in my house. We say on, and we don't say turn on, turn off. Or for example, like the stove, my mom calls it the stirve. And for the longest time, I thought it was a stirve. I go to school and the teachers are like, that is not how you call this thing. And I was like, okay, well, so like you don't realize that's not proper English, quote unquote, until you go to school and they're telling you that's not proper English, because you grow up not thinking it's a different language necessarily, because it's just a dialect that you speak in, right? So it's really interesting how we preserve that language. And definitely, Amir, I relate to that education aspect being pushed down in our family. I think the one thing, my mom would always say is they can take everything, but they can't take your education. And, that's the one thing that you'll always have to be able to keep on and keep going. So I completely can relate to that. A question maybe for our daughters, Chandani, if I could go to you, it would be, if there was one thing that you could pass down next to the next generation, to your children, what would that be?
One thing.
I know there's many, but if there was one thing that you would make sure that needs to be passed down.
I've grown up with so much love in my family. It's only basically me, my mum and my dad. That's my family unit. That's all I've grown up with pretty much since I've been in this country. And if I could pass on one thing, like when I see how much love my parents shower on this one little grandchild picnic they have, like I just want to pass that on, that just amazing amount of love, because so many people just don't have that. So many people in our community don't have that. For me, if she grows up with the amount of love in her heart that my parents have, that hopefully they've given to me, that's the one thing that I think I'd want to pass on to her. So in her friendships, in her community, as she grows, she does everything through love. And that's why my parents did this dance class for free. They put all their time and effort and money into these dance classes. They never used to charge, and it was all out of love. They didn't get anything else from it. So yeah, just love, just do everything with love.
Definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jana, what about you?
I think for my kids, it would be, well, I mean, I didn't grow up with like the immense culture from like the jump start. And I've already like spoken to my dad, but like for me, it's more like I want to have more of that cultural influence with them growing up. I mean, we're in the UK, they're gonna have a UK lifestyle anyway, it's given, but I want to make sure that in the home they like know the traditions and like what kind of foods you eat at Eid, and like the traditions maybe around weddings and celebrations and the stories and stuff like that. So I want to be able to maintain more of like a cultural presence in their life that maybe I didn't have as much of. And also I kind of want to instill that meaning of Indo-Caribbean in them, the resilience and the determination to kind of better yourself.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And Rachel, how about you?
It's kind of funny because at the moment I'm currently going through this with my son. So he's 10, and I discuss, our heritage, where we're from, and he's at that age where he wants to be like his friends. A lot of his friends don't look like him. And so he goes, why are we not, from this place? And, why he kind of does the terminology like, why do we come from slaves? And he'll just say it out there like that. And then I have to go into explaining our whole history and telling him just to be proud, like making sure he's proud of where he's from. And really, because like my dad and my uncles, they sat down and they explained the whole story of, my great grandma.
Great,
yeah, coming from Lucknow to Calcutta to Guyana. Like I'm quite lucky that I know all of that, so I pass that down to him, the knowledge, and then just being able to be proud of it, because also he's mixed, he's half Jamaican, so I have to explain from both sides, be proud of where you're from, because to him it's like, well, both sides, it doesn't really sound like it's that great where I come from, because he's young and he's a bit superficial. He wants to come from a lineage of like royalty, but he doesn't realize in a sense that we do. We actually do. It's how you interpret things. So for me, I just really want him to be proud of where he's from. Like he already gets a sense of our culture through the things I cook, the way my dad speaks, the way we speak sometimes. And, he's very much raised as a young Guyanese mixed child to some extent. But then I also have to remember he's that generation here too, where they want to look a certain way and they want to talk, and, sometimes he doesn't even realize that he's doing it. But yeah, ultimately, I would say I always want him to be proud of where he's from, whether it's the Sri Lankan side, the Guyanese side, the Jamaican side, whichever part he is, he needs to be proud of it and own that. Even his hair, we have discussions about that because his hair's long, it's down to his back, it's curly. And he'll say, Mummy, why do I have long hair? I'm like, because it's lovely, it's beautiful. And then he goes, I want to be like the other boys, I want to cut it and have it short. But then he'll say on Sundays, yeah, my hair is actually really nice. So yeah, it's just always making sure he's proud of where he's from.
Definitely. And Dennis, what would you say about advice that you would pass on to the next generation as well? Anything about in terms of culture or just being able to, you know, survive being Indo-Caribbean in the UK and continuing on?
Well, you know, personally, you know, just be yourself. Be whatever you want to be, you know, because life is like that. You know, we don't know what will happen. We don't know our future. But obviously, we want to take with us, you know, where our grandparents came from, and we want to pass it on. But at the end of the day, just be yourself, be who you are, and enjoy your life. That's what I say. You know,
Love that. Enjoy our lives.
be a Bollywood dancer.
Yeah.
You know, just be yourself.
We'll pass it over to Fidel then. What would a piece of advice that you pass down be?
Of course, with everything else that I'm passing with music, dance, everything, what I would like our younger generation to do, be charitable. Stop, you know, social media. I'm seeing what social media is doing to our young people. I'm speaking about all young people. I'm not differentiating anyone, but I'm seeing what the social media is doing. And what I would love to teach every young person is being kind, charitable. Every day, what I try to do in my life every day is one good deed for someone. And that's what life is. Be good. I'm Hindu, my wife is Christian, and she's taught me so much as well. I mean, because she's come from that sort of background. Christianity teaches you uh, being charitable and good. So I've actually learned from her the way of being a Hindu Christian. And what I would like all youngsters to do, go to church if you can, learn to be charitable, be nice, and stop being grumpy. I just find the youngsters are so grumpy. You speak to them, they just don't even know. They just don't even know to say good morning to you properly. Even good morning, the basic thing they can't do. They look at you in your face every morning. Well, what are you looking at me for? Well, say good morning. The same time you say that to me, say good morning to me. But yeah, but that's what I would like to pass. My advice to the next generation is try to be charitable, try to be nice, cut back on all the social media stuff, and be good people. Be good people.
Thank you. Chandani, I see that you're embracing all of that advice too.
She's a good person. She's a good person.
No, I definitely agree with that. And Amir, how about yourself? Advice that you would pass on?
I really can't add much more to what Fidel and Dennis have said. I think, you know, the ultimate goal of life for me is to try to be as happy as you can. You know, there will always be barriers and there will always be difficulties. But, you know, if you have your family around you and your friends around you, you can get through those problems. Do you know what I mean? But, you know, for younger people, you know, because when you look at the environment now, there's a lot of things out there that you can say, you know, there's no hope, but there's always hope, you know, and you make your own self happy. And I think Fidel is right. You know, I think you have to prioritize what's important in life, because some of the things that I see our younger people put as priority is not as important as other things, you know, the material things, the wanting to have expensive things and branded gear and whatever, you know, those are only fleeting pieces of happiness. But longer term happiness comes from, you know, feeling that you've done something of worth, like Fidel said, you know, that gives you a lot more satisfaction, and you sleep in your bed at night and you feel you've done something worthwhile. So for me, happiness is the thing. And I always want to see my children and my wife happy. And I always want to see that they get what they need to become happy as well. Then they have no excuse.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been such a meaningful and beautiful conversation. I'm so appreciative of the time that you have shared and the space that you've shared with me. Does any of you have any questions for one another? Any last things you would love to say before we wrap this up?
I'd just like to say it was a lovely conversation. It's really, really interesting to hear different perspectives, because it's not always the same.
Yeah, definitely. I think also like to hear the different times of migration for me is so interesting, and how that impacts people's experience as well is so interesting. And also we should all go out for dinner for a dad-daughter dinner.
Yeah.
I'll just put it out there.
Can all meet up. Can all meet up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's why this is so great, like just bringing everyone together. I know Brown Girl Diaries is so good at doing this. I think we all met, I know me and Janet knew each other a little bit before, but like we all got so much closer and knew each other through this platform. And I know everyone's saying social media is so bad, but it has its positives in that, you know, in this times where we're not getting able to go out, and even like we would never meet you in Canada. Do you know what I mean? So I just think that, you know, it's great what we're building. And like I said, the community is in decline here just purely because of everyone's doing their own thing and the community isn't as strong as it was. But hopefully us guys knowing each other now, we can do something to make sure the culture doesn't completely disappear.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think it's really true, because obviously for us, the community has kind of gone slightly down a bit, and you can see that in London. It's already quite rare to find like an Indo-Caribbean event or something along those lines. So I can kind of see this as like a really new platform for, even like you said, like my niece, you know, she's 14. She is obviously a part of the Indo-Caribbean community. She enjoys our culture and everything. So it's nice for her to feel like if I want to find out something, or if I want to be a part of something, that this is now available. Because when I was 14, it wasn't. I would have to know which uncle or auntie is going to whichever event or something, and, you know, or go to someone's house. So it's different. But I think also what is really nice within our community is just that, respectfully, all the dads in this are Indo-Caribbean, but they all have a different look. You know what I mean? Like, not everyone is the same, and this is, unfortunately, we are branded the same, but we are all literally like different elements of where we come from, where our roots have actually come from. And it's so beautiful to see, you know, the different, you know, for example, you know, the Muslim, the Hindu, the Christian, like, it's just really nice to see that all come together.
Yeah,
It's true.
and it's good listening to the stories, because everybody has a story. When you think about it, everybody has a story. And just us four being here, look at how different and diverse our stories are. So yeah, so we need to keep dialogue going as well. And Brown Girl Diaries, I have to commend you that you guys are doing a really fabulous job here. And hopefully you continue doing events like this for Indo-Caribbean people. Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And, you know, I'm really glad that I was able to spend a year in the UK and build so many of these beautiful relationships so that we can sustain them. And you know, Chandani, Jana, Rachel, you guys are ever in Canada, you know, you got a home, you got a space with me always. You know, there's so much for us to celebrate with one another. And thank you for creating a home for me in the UK, and for being my little family, helping me celebrate my birthday when I was there, just taking me in as well. And I just appreciate that our family can, and our community can be so international with one another. I think this is the thing, like, you can go to a brand new country, but you find a Guyanese or Trinidadian or someone, and suddenly you're good. You know, you're settled. You know, you have someone that's going to look out for you, going to help you get your feet on the ground, because that's what our community does. We help uplift one another. And especially, like you've said, there's so much resiliency. We've been through so much. Our ancestors have been through so much. We've learned that aspect of hard work, the ethic of taking care of one another, and bringing community together. So I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for this. It has been streamed on Facebook Live. We will have a recording that will be shared. You can also rewatch, share with your family and friends. And yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Okay.
Thanks, Marisha.
Lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. 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 Bye-bye.